The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional for any health concerns. Take care of yourself out there. Welcome to Unravelling, the podcast that sees the world through the lens of mental health. I'm Kurt White, a social worker and psychotherapist.
And I'm Mary Wilson, a journalist.
And Mary, today we've got a very special guest to help us think about some of the themes that we brought up in the last episode, but in a different way. It's all about loss and mourning and coming together, but around a different sort of loss.
Yeah, really a global loss. I was so honored that Angela Harrelson agreed to do an interview with me. She is the maternal aunt of George Floyd, who was killed by police about 6 years ago now, in May of 2020. And Angela really became a voice of healing and change and justice after his death.
Yeah, it's a time I'll always remember. I was right in the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and I remember friends of mine protesting, lining up in city-filled streets saying, we might get sick, we might get COVID, we might not make it, but this is more important. And I never forgot that. I think it felt like a very important collective process that we were going through at this particular time.
Yeah, and part of Angela's mission is to make that live on, make sure that no one forgets about what happened to her nephew, and also to promote justice and racial justice across the world. So she's involved in an organization called Rise and Remember, which is about memorializing the very place where George Floyd was killed. It's a place now where people can go from all across the world to process that grief and come together.
And that's a kind of thing I've long been interested in. How do we come together around traumas that are collective in nature as well as individual? Of course, for her, it was both. And, a lot has been written about that, but I think what she has to say about it, I think, is really exciting and interesting and very moving, at least to me.
Yeah, it sure is. Angela Harrelson is a registered nurse in Minneapolis, an author, a racial justice advocate. She's the author of Lift Your Voice, How My Nephew George Floyd's Murder Changed the World, and co-chair of Rise and Remember, a foundation dedicated to preserving stories of resistance, creating spaces for community healing, and inspiring people to pursue racial justice locally and globally.
Well, let's get right into it.
Angela Harrelson, it is such an honor to have you on the podcast. Welcome to Unravelling.
Well, thank you very much.
And if people might recognize your name, you have been in the media a lot over the past 6 years, I guess, as you are the aunt of George Floyd, or as your family, and you knew him as Perry, right?
Yeah, as Perry. We called him Perry. The world knew him as George Floyd, but we've always known him as Perry. He was named after his father, and we knew his father as Perry.
And so George Floyd, the name, and it's just become this public symbol, right? For most people in the world, a rallying cry, a martyr. But of course, you knew Perry as a person. Can you just paint the picture a little bit about what we might not know about Perry, having seen just social media and the news, which we know doesn't always paint an accurate picture?
Yeah, it's so true because, they see him as a symbol. And I know that's out of, it's trying to be respectful and it's a way for people to have something to look up to. But he wasn't just a symbol to us. He was family, and he was just like anyone else. He wasn't perfect, and but he was someone that really, truly loved family. I mean, family was everything to him. and a lot of people don't know, he read the Bible almost every day. So he was very religious, loved my sister, loved his mom. Oh, his mom was his heartbeat. And I just remember, after he had gotten in some trouble and served time, that really broken, because disappointment for his mom. And I remember, my sister telling me how he took her to church. She was in a wheelchair at the time, and he took her to church in a wheelchair, and that was the most exciting thing, that my sister, put a big smile on her face. Her son, in church and pushing the wheelchair, and I'll never forget that. But he was just like he could have been anybody's brother and sister, all about community, loved sports, always call me, say, "What's up, Auntie? What you doing today, Auntie?" And I tell people he was just an average person, but he was a big dreamer.
And his family clearly loved him. He loved his family. Take us back to that time in 2020. So much was going on already with the pandemic, and then this terrible thing happens where your nephew is murdered. And you said at the time you didn't even have space to grieve, right? Things were so chaotic. There was the press and the protests and people coming together. What did it look like? What did you need in that moment to grieve?
Here's the thing. I mean, none of us was prepared for any of this. So all of this came out of left field. I guess at that time, I felt like I was in an out-of-body experience, because to family, when you talk about grief and trying to grieve, it's usually a private matter. If you work, you're going to take 3 days off or a week, go have a funeral, planned funeral, talk about memories, work on obituary, all this stuff so privately. And so the difference is, when it happened, you're in shock that it happened. You're dealing with that, but you don't have time to deal with it because it was so public. And then there's media frenzy that you're dealing with. So you're like on automatic process. Just your body is going, but nothing has really caught up with. And that's the best way I can explain it. So you're grieving, and then at the same time, the public is grieving, the community is grieving. So it's a shared grief that is going on. And me learning how to deal with that, how to deal with shared grief. And so what I realize is that, putting myself out there, the strength to put yourself out there, that shared grief was very powerful, because it helped me get through some really, really difficult, tough times that I was unprepared for, I never seen before in my lifetime. Meaning dealing with being followed, harassed, the threats. Yes, there was a lot of outpour and love, and I welcome that. And we needed at that time to get through. But there was another dark side to it that a lot of people didn't see. And that's where your community comes in.
In that moment, you could have stayed silent or sort of retreated, but you chose to use your voice, right? And step into sort of a role and call for justice. What was that decision? Was there some tension there where maybe you just wanted to stay private?
I didn't come out for about a week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe a little bit longer. I would say, because there was the fear. I didn't know what to do. And I just wanted oh my God, I can't think just go back the way, it's like it was just so much to deal with. Because you turn the TV on, it's every single station. You go outside, it's everywhere. I know he's gone, but he's everywhere. And I said, but I will go to bed. I will wake up thinking about him all the time, about the whole thing. And then you go to sleep dreaming about it. So trying to find peace and the grief. And so I'm like, oh my God, I want to do something and hearing some of the negativity in the news. No, 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 he's not like that. You say these things. I said, God, how can I be a voice for him? I mean, I got to do something, but I'm not sure if I'm strong enough, and I'm toying with this. And I'm a very faithful person. I'm very strong in my faith. And I remember God speaking to me of whatever people want to call it, how power, intuition. But for me, and I remember that message that I got out of it, Angela, you can do this. And then it took me back to him. I was seeing Perry saying, I can't breathe. But the message he was trying to tell me, Angela, if I can give Perry, your nephew, in those conditions, when he was dying, saying, I can't breathe, when he was in pain, and Lord knows what he was going through, surely I can give you the strength to be a voice for him. And I never forgot that. That was a message that woke me up, that sparked something in me. I was still a little nervous. I was still a little scared. But when it told me I could do it, and that's when I started speaking and going out. And I didn't have a lot of skills and stuff for doing it, but I just did it. And I got better because I just spoke from the heart. I told my truth. And I was just trying to be transparent. And I just went out there because it was so important, not just the justice for the community, for justice for humanity, that was very important.
Mm. I can tell you have such a powerful voice and such a skill for sharing your truth. What did it feel like for you when you started to speak out about this?
It gave me, it's like, that's where I think some of the healing, the beginning of the healing, to work towards healing. And I noticed that it came like a quiet confidence. And it felt better. It felt like I had a voice. I felt like I was being heard. I don't know if everyone was listening, or I just started speaking out. And it felt like it gave me, you know what? This is the beginning of healing, because now I have a purpose. Mm. The grief turned into a purpose.
And that happened quickly, right? You were still grieving as you were working through this.
Well, the one thing about grief, I grieved, and then all of a sudden it was like, I don't know where it went. It can be delayed grief. You can start grief. It can be delayed grief where you're just going through the emotion and like, what is wrong with me? Because you're working so hard, you get so into the activism, and that you try so hard, you forget it's okay to take a moment and just cry, and it's okay. So there were those periods that I went through in the beginning, and it was on and off. And there was I was talking to his brother yesterday. He said it took him 2 years to really finally just grieve. So, some of us knew him differently. So the relationship was differently and the grief was different. So, yeah, a couple of his brothers told me that they felt like they didn't really hit him to after 2 years, because you're put out there and so much is expected of you. And there's a responsibility that you take on.
That's really powerful to say that you turned your grief into purpose. Can you say more about that and the connection between the two? Because sometimes it feels like it's senseless and there is no purpose to death.
It can feel that way, though. Death is hard. There is no other way around it. When you lose someone, a loved one, your mom, your sister, your brother, someone that you've been in your life close to, or not even close to sometimes. And I say that because so many people did not know my nephew personally, but they could feel the rawness of the pain, because this could have happened to their brother, their sister, so everyone connected with. And so I think what began to happen is that if you can grieve alone, which I don't recommend doing that. Get support. That's where the community comes in, or get therapy, whatever you need to do. But when you start to turn that grief into purpose, it wakes something up inside of you. You courage, experience the bravery that you didn't think you knew how to do. And so as you speaking more, as you going out, as you trying to fight, it gives you that energy. Um, you're still connected to the pain somehow. It doesn't mean that the pain is going away, but you now have a purpose to make the right, to get justice. And most of all, to show people what humanity looks like. So when you're out there, like when I'm out there uh, doing my activism work, it is so important that I have to do it out of love. Because love shines a light. You can't do it with hate. Yes, you're going to be frustrated. And sometimes, oh my God, and that may cross your mind. But when you have a purpose in life, if your purpose is about humanity, that's for all of us. That's not just for Perry. That's for all of us. You see what I'm saying? And so I'm just, that my purpose is to show people of humanity what humanity should look like. Because the whole purpose is not to say Black Lives Matter for the next 50 or 100 years. You have to come to a place where you don't need to say Black Lives Matter.
Yeah. And the fact that you chose to move with love instead of hate. I mean, I don't think anyone would blame you for feeling that hate.
Yeah, I get that too quite a bit, But I said, but what is it going to do to me? I don't want to be in prison. I don't want this to live in my head. What is hate going to get you hating? It's going to get you darkness. And what I've learned is that people will be attracted to you. Spiritually, a connection, it doesn't have to be spiritual, but people will listen to you more when you come across with compassion, you're authentic, and you do it with love.
I know part of your purpose had to do with George Floyd Square and the memorial. Can you just walk me through? I know it all started so organically. When did you first become aware of this growing memorial?
Well, I knew it was there. I remember the first time I was trying to get to it, but the crowds was so huge, I couldn't get through it, and I didn't want no one to know who I was because I was still on the dive floor, because it's just too much. So I went back, and I said, "Oh my goodness!" And then they had the funeral, and so we went to the memorial to pay respects, but it was different because there were so many people around, so I didn't have the chance to really get in. I said, okay. So by that time in June, I'd done some speaking. And I think towards maybe the end of June, I said, okay, when I got that strength, when that guy sent me that clear message, I don't know how ready I was when he told me that message that I'll never forget. If I could give him the strength to say I can't breathe, surely I can give you the strength to be a voice for him. So I still remember that in my heart, and I went out there, and I said, okay, this is the time I'm taking this walk without my family. I'm taking it by myself. It was very important. So when I went out there, I just started walking. But little did I know, I wasn't really paying too much attention because people knew who I were. Because remember, I had got out and started speaking with the strength. And so I remembered I was walking. A couple people came up to me. "Oh, are you George Floyd auntie?" I said, "Yes, I am." I said, "I'm going to the memorial." And they just started walking with me. I said, "Okay." And they were talking to me, and I saw, a caretaker there that was meticulously sweeping and caring for the office that was being placed there. Oh, I think about it, one that makes me cry. And then something told me to look back. It was other people coming around, and they were saying hello, and they were bringing flowers. They were introducing themselves. It was one that was lighting candles. It was in the evening, and it just really touched me. And it was doing this not just for my family, but for their community and for their purpose. And that was an overwhelming love and joy that I felt. And then that's when the connection started building. And it's like, I want to get to know more about this community and these people, because what they have shown me. And so I started getting to know them. Uh, I I got together with a young lady, Janelle Austin, and we formed this organization with another family member called Rise and Remember. And that's how that came apart. Became part of everything. And I just started getting to feel in love with the community. They became like family. So I lost Perry, but I gained a community. And it was just well to see that. And I've never been a part of anything that strong and that passionate. So once that started, now you speak of shared community, shared grief, shared purpose. Now we're walking in our purpose, and I'm not walking alone, I'm walking with the community. And now I'm going through the trials, I'm going through the court process, and having all of this together, which was extraordinary, which was very, very powerful. Because remember, I tell people, when the people come, they're grieving too, in their own way. So now we have those talks together. We have shared stories, shared testimony. I met people who I never met before that knew my nephew, and they wanted to share with me.
So you were going through this private grief, the grief of an aunt losing a beloved nephew, and at the same time being this public voice. Can you define the difference between these two, sort of the public grieving and the personal? Can they be the same? And were there moments when they were in conflict?
They're different because private grieving is different than public grieving, but what makes it powerful when it becomes a shared grief. But the only way you can know it is shared is to engage and listen and come together in solidarity. That's when it becomes a shared grief and a public grief. People come to that space from all over the world. They come there with flowers, they come there with letters, they come there with books, they come there with art, they come there with food, they come there with song. So you're doing all of this. One of the most powerful connections, and I experienced a lot of them, but one that really stood out to me this day was a gentleman. I remember I was there, because I go to the memorial almost 4 to 7 times a week for different reasons. And a man came up to me, and I would never forget it. He was crying profusely. And so we're used to that. We're used to comforting, and I'm also used to receiving that. And so, but this was different because he just was crying so much that he could barely speak. And so I was just thinking, my God, this is really emotional. And it was tearing me up. But the first words that came out of his mouth, he said, "I used to be a racist," which was something that I wasn't expecting. I'm used to expecting that, "I'm sorry for your loss. I'm here." The words that most really spoken. And I really didn't know how to respond to that. So I kind of paused. And I remember I was holding his hands, and I said, "Okay." And he said, "That man right there," he pointed to the site where Perry took his last breath. He said, that man right there changed my life. And that was like, wow. And I remember he hugged me. He said, and then he said he was so sorry for everything, but he said, "That man right there changed my life." And he walked away, and I realized that was his way of healing, dealing with his own personal demons, but coming to to tell me something like that was very, very brave, but that was something he needed to do. And I realized, that man needs that healing more than I do. And I remember saying that, but I never saw him again.
And that was just one instance. I'm sure so many lives have been changed, and you've been able to see that happen. How important is that physical space? And I know that it lives on today, George Floyd Square.
It's truly the sacred. It's a very, very sacred place. But I tell people that come bring humanity to that space. That's what makes it so sacred. Most of the people that come there are not coming there to be mean, are not coming there. You're meeting people all over the world that's bringing their humanity, that's bringing their love, that's bringing, that hope. And it becomes, it's everybody's memorial there in the community. And they're very protective of that memorial. And they want it to stay there because that space speaks a historical tragedy that happened. That space is about truth. That space speaks of a time where the world stood as one about we need to get this right. We need to fight. And it represents so much hope. And it also represents a space where we need to continue to right our wrongs.
In the story that you just mentioned about the person admitting that they were once racist and dealing with their own sort of personal grief, what's it like for you to take on the grief of others, especially when you have your own grief? And do those two sort of interact?
You know what? In the beginning, it was really kind of hard. I'm be honest with you, because I'm lost. I'm like, okay, I'm lost. I'm trying to deal with it. But there were some people that would come and say, you don't need to comfort me because you're dealing with your own. And I said, I know, but so are you. And I will always come back with that. And so what I learned, it became a shared grief. So now we hold each other up. And that's the difference. Now I go to spaces that are more healing and about reflection. Now, 6 years now. In the beginning, it's a lot of memories. Not just my memories, but people in the community have their memories. So now it's to the point we sit there in the memorial because there are benches there where you can sit and talk to one another. You can hold one another's hands. They share their stories with you. There are people that come there in wheelchairs. There's the deaf, hard of hearing community that comes there, and with their sign language interpreter, and try to share their, they do the thing love, and I've learned some little things too. And I remember one time there was over like 700 pastors there. And then they came through to visit and they prayed. People have laid in the space for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. They just lay there for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. They do that. The Native Americans, they come there to do a ritual in the space. So like I said, they have their own grief that they express in so many different ways. And I listen and I sit, while they express their grief. And then we talk. And we talk about so many things. And some doesn't ever talk about politics in the memorial. Yes, he does politics. Memorial. There's so many people come. Some people come disguised. They don't want you to know who they are. But you come there so much that I can see who is who and who is who. But all types of people come there and share their grief, and it's very, very powerful. It's a solidarity that is unbreakable because, like I said, people bring their humanity to that space, and that's what makes it sacred.
Mm. And even though you go, what you said, up to 5 times a week still, do you still feel that same, those same emotions come over you, even though it's a space that you frequent so often?
Well, sometimes I feel that emotion is different. Each often is different. Um, Sometimes I just go there and I see visitors. And if I go there, if I see someone there, I always make a point to go there and say thank you for paying respect to my family and the community today. Because it's very important to me to do that. And I don't care how tired I am. If I see someone there, I will pull over, get out of that car. And I say, I have done it after I've got off work. And say, I just want you to know that thank you. That's the least I can do because how you guys showed up in 2020 for my family and for the community. And most of the time, they're totally shocked that the family members even they're like, where did you come from? But I'm glad that I got a chance to meet you because most of the time they're very surprised by that. And most of the time they're very surprised and very, very grateful that that interaction took place. Because you talk about a lot of people coming from out of town. I was there recently. There was someone from Spain, they're from France, from Germany. And they come from so far. And if I'm there, the least I can do is to come up to say thank you when they come from so far.
Seeing George Floyd's name fade from the headlines after, 24-hour coverage for so many months, and now 6 years later, is that hard to see the spotlight shift away? Or in your world, are you still shining just as much of a light on his life and the change that you hope happens?
Well, the thing is that I really don't pay too much attention to the media because I'm so involved in it that I see it all the time. Because hundreds of people come to the square all the time, almost every day. I still see it happening. And I do think that with everything that's going on, they're trying to make it, erase it or go away. But the thing is that it really hasn't went anywhere. The people in 2020 that fought, most of them are still around. And their feelings have not changed. Their voices have not changed. And many of those people are still existing. And Minnesota have shown people that. We never went anywhere.
Renee Good was killed just a few blocks away from that site, and the two memorials are very close to each other. What is that like, and what has that meant for the community that calls that area home?
Oh, it was devastating. The thing about that, Renee and Alex, because there were two, their lives were lost and their families would never be the same again. So the humanity should always be first with that. For the family and what oh my goodness, what they have to go through. Lord have mercy. That's the first thing I thought about. Oh my God, what they are going through and how they're going to be attacked and the media. But Minnesota showed a lot of love for them. There are a lot of people around the world that showed a lot of love and support for them. It was very difficult because here the thing is, it was trauma. For the last 6 years, we went through a lot of trauma, post-trauma. We called it collective PTSD in the square. Collective PTSD, and when you see people react the way they do and they fight so hard for the passion and for the justice for them, it's because a lot of things they have went through before. And you bring that, you just a trigger and you bring that trauma into that. Sometimes you're just going through the process trying to heal. And that's what a lot that you saw, the frustration that no, you can't, no, it's not okay. You can't, and you're going to hear us.
And you knew sort of what the families of Alex Preddy and Renee Good were going through. You sort of lived it yourself. Were you able to speak to members of those families at all? And what was sort of the advice, or what did you share with them?
Well, I haven't had a chance to reach out to him because I know what it's like to be overwhelmed with all the media and people reaching out. And sometimes you don't know who is real, who's authentic. And even though I know what they're going through, it was very important to give them that space. And it's something that if for me to do is to do it privately and not with cameras. It was very important. And so I knew that is the way that I would like to handle it with them, to reach out to them, do it in private. And that's how I like to do it, offer my support and love, because I know their life is forever changed.
And with the fear and grief that people are feeling in response to the ICE raids, what do you think the most important sort of lessons from the past 6 years are? What feels most important right now?
I'm struggling to always be for humanity. See, here the thing is that when they came, they said they were looking for the criminals and the people, the certain communities, certain people of color. Let's just keep it real. And that was disheartening to know that certain communities, certain people of color, Hispanics, Somali, we had a lot of that going on at that time that drew ICE in here. And so the lesson that should be learned out of all this is that you think about humanity. Because our community felt terrorized. They were scared. Businesses were stopped because of the fear. We know that people have a job they have to do. Nobody is saying that people who are doing horrible things should stay in the country. No one's ever saying that. But there's a way to do anything. And the thing is that when you label people a certain group, certain way, they get targeted and can be mistreated. And when you go into this with that attitude and you don't institute humanity, the same people that have instituted these policies to do this, because it gets blurred, humanity gets blurred, and what you're doing, anything can happen to anybody. Anything. And what happened, we had 2 white people that got killed. Nobody expected that. I'll be honest. Everybody was like, huh? But they don't look like, you're saying. But I tell people, see, I'm telling you, when you don't focus on humanity and you focus on the wrong things and you letting greed, power influence you, and that's not right, anything can happen to anybody. And that's the sad thing about it. The thing is, it shouldn't happen at all. So people need to know underneath all this stuff, we fight against racism. We fight against sexism. We fight against, all these things of inequality. And when you strip everything down, race, religion, sexual orientation, everything, it's about humanity.
Many of our listeners may be right now just overwhelmed by the injustices in the world happening, feeling like you can't do anything. And I love the name of the group that you're part of, Rise and Remember.
Rise and Remember. Yes.
That's such a powerful name. And what can that teach us about what we can do now? How can we rise and remember?
This is what I tell people, is that, and I came up with that name for our organization. But here's the thing. If you want to do something, don't just join the movement. You got to become the movement. Become the change. It's a difference. Because so many people join. They want to do this, they want that. They're so excited. But do you become the change? Because what you see in the George Floyd Square, when you see people out there, and when you see these people out in the protest or whatever they're doing, marching, they became the movement. They became change. They became the voice. Because if you don't become that, what you are speaking out, then your voice becomes silent and you become neutral. And then, and then you go back and forth. You tip your toes in, you tip your toes out. You tip your toes in, but you're not full in. You can only make change can only become powerful when you are all in. And all in doesn't mean you have to be out there holding a sign. You can do change any type of way. You become a change any type of way. Like as you want to make a difference, if you can cook for justice, cook the best meal for justice. If you can sing for justice, sing for justice. If you can write for justice, write for justice. But whatever you do, become it, feel it, believe it. And then you have the authenticity and you come across with love. And people hear you and they will listen to understand. You know, people don't think when you step up to do something, the things that you have done prior in life, you don't realize it, whether it's good or bad, you've gone through, are preparing you for it, journey ahead. They're preparing you, but you don't know it at the time. So all the years I went through, racism, growing up in the Jim Crow area, turned down for this, because of being a female, race, whatever, and working in these mental health fields, all that has prepared you for now, but you just don't know it.
Well, you have certainly changed the world, as have your nephew and your whole family. So we thank you for that. And thank you so much for spending the hour chatting with me.
Thank you, and you have been wonderful. Thank you.
And I just want to thank Angela once again for her strength and her grace and how she's just willing to share her story with me and for the rest of the world. Kurt, I know you were listening along. That was a really special interview, wasn't it?
Oh, my goodness. A very special and moving interview. It brought me to tears a couple of different times. And also stirred up a lot, I think, in a positive way. That sort of sense of, finding a way into something that you can do. I think that's just so very powerful.
Yeah.
And it made me want to go there to the square, to this memorial, and see it with my own eyes. I haven't been to Minnesota since I was a kid, but maybe I'm going to have to book tickets pretty soon.
Yes. The same feeling came over me. I wanted to see it and be there because Angela says how people just start sobbing or there's all sorts of waves of emotion that come over you. And I actually found a virtual tour that you can find. I'll include the link in our show notes where you can go through the different art installations and the different aspects of the memorial, which includes a symbolic installation, which is the Say Their Name cemetery of other Black people who were killed by police. So I really recommend it to anyone who wants to visit the square themselves.
It sounds really special.
Yeah.
I will check that out as soon as we get done recording. I'm going to actually check that out.
Very good.
Yeah.
And if people want to learn more about Rise and Remember or Angela's book, I'll include those links in the show notes as well.
Well, thank you, Mary, and thank you, Angela, and thank you, listeners, for joining us on this journey. And we will see you again in a couple of weeks.
See you then.
Unravelling is brought to you by Brattleboro Retreat. Our producers at Charts and Leisure are Andrew Adkin, Hans Buetow, and Jason Oberholzer.
And you can find us on social media by searching Brattleboro Retreat. Brattleboro Retreat is committed to exploring diverse perspectives on mental health. While we invite hosts and guests to share their insights, the views expressed are their own and do not necessarily reflect the policies or positions of the hospital or its staff.